I am so conservative.
Rationalize in my head. These are things I read in
And
the
I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had
remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah. I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative. And welcome to the Unknown Webcast. Today is July 27, 2021, and this is webcast number 250. You hear that, Ron? 250. We can't even celebrate that.
And I should have had a cake baked.
Should have had a cake baked.
Yes.
Exactly. For those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones, this is a bit of a trigger warning. I really am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving. In addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection.
Your protection.
Yeah.
So you can thank us later. You're welcome.
Exactly, yeah. Today, Tony Brown from ReachOut Trust in the UK joins us to describe his adventure moving from the Watchtower to ReachOut Trust. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is still Ron Hensel. He's a resident smart guy, so he can't leave.
Yeah, well, and you can't find anybody else,
Well, especially for the wage, I'm telling you.
Yeah, right.
And he's going to introduce the sponsors of today's webcast, and here is Ronnie Baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm trees came out, saw their shadows. Now we have 12 more months of summer, and boy, was it hot at my son's outdoor wedding, let me tell you, in Orlando. But anyways, our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is WorldZen, Theology Outlet, your one-stop resource for half-baked heresies, dubious doctrines, and other ideas whose time has gone. World's End Theology Outlet. And our legal disclaimer, our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that would be Tony Brown, I have to check, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the webcast, although we will probably not mention it again. This satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the category or definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. This is from our law firm at Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. Notice the opinions expressed in this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy the webcast or if it annoys you and you want to inflict it on someone you don't like to ensure your continued access to this program, please go to MidwestOutreach.org, click the yellow donate button and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. Greetings, Tony Brown. We're going to have a quiz on all that after the program. That's why we have you on. That's really the only reason we brought you on.
Well, and we have to have that disclaimer for two reasons. One is we don't know if you have a sense of humor or not.
We've had people.
You'll find out.
Yes.
Yeah. we kind of came up with it because one of our good friends. Always starts off when we do the webcast. She goes, I take no responsibility for the satire here. So we thought, well, let's just do a disclaimer.
We'll just cover everybody. Yeah, that's you punish everybody for the sins of the few. That's what you do.
That's exactly right. So now I have known about ReachOut Trust for quite a long time. Before I ever even heard of Tony Brown or Michael Thomas, I had some acquaintance with Doug Harris, kind of the founder and starter, and we shared a number of things back and forth across the large pond between us.
Yes.
And then he passed away, and I had a new contact come up by the name of Roger Monk, who is in some ways affiliated. And then more recently, I think in the last year or something, we have reconnected with you all. You first, and then Michael. So we're glad to have you on. And when we're done, you'll know you've been had.
Yeah, it's really good to be here, and it's really good to know that this is the 250th show. Makes me feel rather special, you know, like you should have got someone important for the 250th.
Well, you will become important after this show. You will. And
I can't wait to receive the cake through the post.
You will.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, you'll walk down the street and go, "Oh yeah, we just saw you on
the." You were on the 250th, weren't you?
That's right. Yeah, I'm honored.
Yes.
So let's begin in the beginning. Just shortly after you were born, what happened after that?
Well, just after I was born, I sort of grew up here in northern England, and in a family of 6 children, 5 sisters and me.
Oh, wow.
So that was good fun growing up, especially when they decided to hand down the clothes.
You were the oldest? Were you the oldest?
So you weren't the oldest?
I was the second youngest, so I had a lot of clothes to go through. But
it's
so I was very confused and mixed up growing up.
Yeah, but you're in therapy and it's doing much better, right?
Yeah, still receiving it. Yeah, but no religious background really. We would describe ourselves as Church of England, as most people did, and yeah, we would fill all the forms in saying we were Church of England, but we'd only ever attend church for weddings, christenings, funerals, and the like. Mainly christenings. My family loved a good party, and that's what it was about. It was about getting the baby christened and then straight to the pub.
That's when those COE people really whoop it up at the christening.
Oh yeah, right? Yeah. So that's we made the most of that.
I heard a story of a pastor who was going through the membership list, and he would write C and E next to names as he would go along, and someone said, "What does that stand for?" He said, "Christmas and Easter only."
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, and it's still the case for many people in the UK. If they're going to go to church, be Christmas and Easter.
Well, it's the same here in the US. We figure that there's going to be a bigger turnout. There almost always is. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Okay, so you grew up Church of England, and then not really religious. So
nope.
Sort of a belief in God, but not committed to it.
Yeah, I would say we never really talked about God or never really thought about God's existence. It wasn't that we were atheist, certainly not consciously, but I think it just wasn't part of our lives. And so we grew up with very little knowledge of God, of the Bible. I'm old enough to still remember when we had the proper assemblies in our schools. So, you would sing the occasional sort of song. It's always like, all things bright and beautiful or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And we used to get the little Bibles, which I think the Gideons are still trying to give out those now. But I received a little Gideon Bible, but really not conscious of anything. I think the first time I really thought about Jesus was the TV program, Jesus of Nazareth, with Robert Powell. I think that was the first time I ever really thought about a person called Jesus or anything. And really enjoyed that show, but it didn't affect my life in any way. And it wasn't really until I was 21, so that was just 2 years ago now.
Yeah,
obviously.
You don't look a day over 20, to be honest.
Well, I'm going to say, yeah. I mean, life's tough here. Life's tough here in the UK.
It is.
And so my mother died, and it was a great shock. To us as a family. We weren't expecting her to pass away. My sister knocked on our door. I was living with one of my other sisters at the time. She knocked on the door middle of the night, and obviously I couldn't hear what was being said, but I knew something serious had happened, and it was that gave rise to me to consider life, death, heaven, hell.
Yeah.
Is there a God? Isn't there a God? And normal things for people who are bereaved. But for me, it stuck. I really, really wanted to know. I wanted answers. And I remember asking the Church of England minister at my mother's funeral where she'd gone. And his words were, well, God thought it was time for her to go, so he's taken her. That was it. And I thought, what does that even mean? I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
And so I really wasn't getting anywhere with that. So I began to read lots of different literature, mainly about the afterlife. We used to have a lady here in the day who was a famous sort of like spiritualist medium, a lady called Doris Stokes. I don't know if she was ever heard of in America, but she was the big thing at the time. So I read her books. She would say, you know, there is an afterlife. You've got spirit guides looking after you. She painted a picture of when you die, you pass to somewhere like this, but more Eden-like, and your loved ones are waiting for you. And I think I didn't really fall for that, but I was really interested in that. And so that's how I began to sort of look into things and get into all kinds of weird afterlife stuff that I was reading. But it wasn't until sometime after that, my sister said to me, I need you to come around to my house on Saturday morning. Got some people coming around to see you. They came to my house. I've invited them back especially for you. And it was there that I met the Jehovah's Witnesses for the first time.
Now, how old were you then?
So I was 21. Yeah, I was still 21. Yeah,
Okay.
I was searching for around about 6 months, 7 or 8, maybe 6 or 7 months before I met the JWs. Yeah, after my mum passed away.
Now, here I want to say something here for everyone who watches this to hear. This is really important, and because I so often get the question, how can someone be so deceived so easily? And oftentimes it's a matter of they think intellect. And I have to point out that it has nothing to do with intellect. It has everything to do with life change, usually, that brings somebody into various groups. You're not well taught. You're pretty experienced at what you do for a living and other sorts of things. Religion often is not one of those issues. Even if you grow up in a church, you may not have answers. And so if you meet a particular group at a time when you're having big questions and they seem to have the right kinds of answers, it is easy to draw you in.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So
they answered all my questions.
And were you happy with those answers at the time?
Yeah, very much so. I had no frame of reference. I couldn't measure them against anything. They said they were teaching me what the Bible taught, and I had no reason to doubt that. They opened the Bible. Their literature was full of Bible verses, and I was looking. I think I was looking to join something, and I think it was those guys that came along and answered all my questions. So I very quickly sold out to them, really. I began a Bible study, or what they call a Bible study, with them that very week. And I thought I'd found what I was looking for.
Okay.
Wow.
So how long were you one of Jehovah's Witnesses? How far did you go in the organization?
So I wasn't in there a great length of time. I was in there about 4 years in total, and but thoroughly convinced that I had the truth, as they call it, and began to dress like them and look like them and talk like them and walk like them.
Walk like them.
Yeah, bought the briefcase.
Definite walk.
Yeah, there's a definite walk.
Is there a JW walk? What is it?
Well, you can definitely spot Jehovah's Witnesses down the street from behind. It's not always how they're dressed. You just tell by the walk.
They're sauntering?
And I think, like a sauntering along. Maybe they don't want to admit this, but maybe sauntering is so they don't have to knock on as many doors.
Well, I've actually been told that by ex-JWs that they want to stretch it out or something. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
hours of field work that count, or is it number of doors you knock on that count?
No, it's hours. It was definitely hours at the time. Yeah, and we filled in little timesheets. I've still got some of those in the briefcase that I had at the time as well. I've still got those. Keep them to remind me of my dodgy past.
Dodgy.
But the timesheets, you filled in by hours. You did record everything, people's names and discussions that you had, but it was the hours that was important. So walk slowly. Hope that you get a long discussion on a door, so you don't have to knock on as many doors.
Now you have to fill out the time card so that Jehovah knows that you've been going door to door, because he's not up on everything, right?
Well, that's right. Yeah. He obviously is too busy to know what we're doing at that point. So the card helps him. Yeah, he checks those later when he's got a few moments spare.
You know,
Yeah.
years ago, they actually used to teach that God lives in the Pleiades, and he would send angels to kind of keep track of what's going on. It was a 3-day round trip, according to the Watchtower. And so Joy and I thought, well, if we don't really talk about our vacation, we could leave and we could get back before they discover we're gone, and they will never know we left.
That's really handy. Yeah, I wonder if any of the JWs did that. Yeah,
I don't know.
Well, I can relate to your story a bit because my father died when I was almost 16, and that within 8 months I'd become a Christian. I launched me on a search. I'd been agnostic up to that point. I was raised in the Catholic Church, but I wasn't. I mean, if you'd asked me, I would have told you I was an agnostic. And there's something about the loss of a very close loved one. For me, at least, it was, wait a minute, my agnosticism doesn't make sense anymore. The idea that a person could pass away and just not exist didn't make any sense to me. So launched me on my search too. So
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think that many people begin to consider life and death when these things happen to them. My sister did. My sister, who introduced me to the Jehovah's Witnesses, she began a Bible study with them as well, but it never really hooked her like it hooked me. And yeah, I think for many people, they have these big questions, but time seems to send those away and they get back into a pattern of life again. But for some, the search continues, and I think that's why I ended up entertaining these guys and meeting with them.
Right. Well, for me, I grew up as an atheist. I was an atheist. My father was an atheist. He wasn't a philosophical atheist. He just asserted God didn't exist, and it allowed him to live however he chose to live. And I essentially adopted that. Didn't know anything else really. I had some friends who were Christians who went to church occasionally, mostly because their parents made them go.
Yeah,
they didn't behave all that differently than I did. So I met Joy and we married. And after we had our son, so we dated 3 years. She shouldn't have dated me. We married. She shouldn't have married me. I'm glad she did both. We had our son 3 years later, and she woke up and sort of had this epiphany that I have this new responsibility, what I'm going to teach him. And so she started reading some books that she got from her mother, who was really a faithful believer, and rededicated her life to the Lord, and then asked me if I would read them. So that life transition is ultimately what brought me to the faith. It allowed me the opportunity to ask hard questions. As I read the material, I realized, kind of like Ron did, there has to be something more than just this. And I couldn't really be a good atheist because that's a claim to know something I can't really know. I can't know God doesn't exist. I thought I could be an agnostic. I thought that would be okay because it's not a claim to know anything. But that became unsatisfying because I like to know stuff. I have a curious mind. And so I ended up coming to the faith for 3 reasons. One, the Bible fundamentally is accurate to what was originally written. That doesn't mean inspired. 2, the resurrection has strong evidence that it is true, which led me kind of to 3. If the resurrection is true, and the guy who died said he would raise himself from the dead and then did, seems like a reliable character to believe that the Bible is inspired because he believed it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, all makes sense.
Yeah, so it was logical to me to come to the faith. So you were going door to door, filling out your timesheets. So Jehovah would know what you were up to when he wasn't looking. What sorts of experiences did you have in the Watchtower, and how did that shape your ability to stay in or leave?
I think that because I believed I'd found what I was looking for, I was quite settled, and they became my new family, which is a common thing you probably hear again from people who've been involved with these groups. And I spent all my time with them. I was at their houses. I was out on the doors with them. I was at Kingdom Hall meetings. And so sure was I that what I had was true that I tried to convince everyone else around me, including my own family. I used to say to my father, who was still grieving, that if he didn't come to the Kingdom Hall and become a Jehovah's Witness, then obviously he would perish at Armageddon, which of course was coming very, very soon, as it always has been. And
forever.
and so I became a pain in the neck, really, to my family. And if you had them here today, they would tell you that. And I became quite arrogant as a Jehovah's Witness as well, believing I had all the answers. I had secret knowledge that these other people didn't have and Christians didn't have. Obviously, stopped celebrating birthdays and Christmas as much as I believe that was true. And my family couldn't understand any of that kind of stuff. I would have claimed at the time that I wouldn't have a blood transfusion should I have needed one. Although, whether that would have worked out, would I have needed one? I don't know.
Right.
But so yeah, I enjoyed the Jehovah's Witnesses. To me, they were lovely people, very sincere people, trying to work out what they believed was true, and lots of fun experiences on the door. Most of it was apathy that you used to meet, really, but you had the odd spicy argument and discussion with people, and then you had people who would let you in, people who would take your literature. At the time back then, you had a vested interest in placing literature with them, not just to get the literature into their hands, but to get your money back, because I used to have to pay for the literature at the Kingdom Hall and then take it out. And the way I got my money back was by selling it on the doors. And so, yeah, and I think when you went out in a group as well, you felt a bit of camaraderie and fellowship in that, and you were in something together. So all seemed to be right and proper. I had a girlfriend when I went into the Jehovah's Witnesses, but very quickly finished with her because she didn't want to know. All my friendship group changed. Everything changed, really. And so, but I thought I got the truth. And so everything was worth losing for this truth that I found. And I began, like all the Jehovah's Witnesses do, to strive to please this God that I thought needed me to strive, needed me to exert myself and spend all my waking hours trying to serve him and please him and stay on the right side of him to have any hope of surviving Armageddon, which I was never, of course, sure of.
Right. My friend Lori McGregor, she's retired now, but one of the things that she would point out is, because she was a faithful Jehovah's Witness for 15 years, door to door, and in part she was faithful because she never knew if she was going to make it. She said, you work hard, and it could be that one day you say, I'm going to take a little bit of a break, and then a week later, Jehovah shows up. Bam, you're executed. That's it.
Yeah.
But or you could make it into the kingdom, and you still have to go door to door in addition to cleaning up the mess and getting the houses back together, and you have to start Bible studies. And let's say you kind of take a little break while you're doing that, and then you're right at Final Judgment Day. Boom, that's it. You're done. So you never ever know that you have any kind of security. It is always tenable. You're always possibly going to be annihilated.
It sounds like they don't have Psalm 130 verse 3 in their Bible. If you should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? Which, of course, directly implies very strongly that for his children, Jehovah does not mark iniquities. He doesn't keep score. He doesn't have a chalkboard that he, you blew it there, you blew it there. He doesn't do that. But in the Watchtower Society, he does.
Yeah, very much so. I definitely would agree with Laurie McGregor in the way she saw things, that if I was out faithfully serving on the doors on a Saturday, for example, and Armageddon was to come while I was out on the street, then even then I still wasn't 100% sure I would be saved, even though I was at his business when Armageddon came. But I had some hope because I was about his business. But should I have stayed in and decided to have a day off, watch TV, or go out with my family or whatever and do something different, then suddenly everything's precarious.
So we don't here's the thing: we don't have a direct command in the Bible to go anywhere, door to door. Go into all the world and preach the gospel does not require door to door. You can do it the way we're doing it right now online, but before we had this, you could do it at work. You could do it when it came up. So what they're nailing you for isn't even commanded in Scripture. They're acting as though Jehovah issued this proclamation, this command. Well, it's not in the Word. No. So where did it come from?
Yeah.
Oh,
what's interesting, Ron? Yeah, what's interesting, Ron, is that now they're having to face what you're saying, because for the last 18 months or so, they've not been going door to door. They've not been on our street corners. They're hiding away. So
you mean there was a loophole in the Bible for
obviously, yeah. So all these guys
really?
that for years and years and years have been saying we're the true believers in Jehovah because we're the only ones that really go door to door. Well, they haven't been doing it for the past year and a half. So where does that leave them? Well, can they just send letters to people's homes like they are doing, and that's just as good?
I got a couple. I received a couple.
Yeah, I've had some as well, and so you begin to think, well, maybe that door-to-door work was not necessary anyway. Really, there actually are other ways.
I got these little Charlie Brown and Sally and Lucy Brown, Dear Pen Pal letters from, or Dear Pencil Pal. I think it was in Peanuts, right? So, it's. Yeah, well, I don't want to interrupt you. Keep going with your stream of consciousness.
I mean, it's just. I mean, you just made a really good point, Ron, because I think I'm challenging Jehovah's Witnesses with these things at the moment because through the letters and through various other means online, are engaging with Jehovah's Witnesses, and my big question to them is, for years and years and years, you've been saying it's got to be door-to-door work. That's what the Bible teaches. You must do that to please Jehovah, to have any chance of being saved. Where are you? I'm on the streets. I'm on the streets sharing telling people about Jesus. But where are you guys? And it's really interesting to challenge them with that at the moment, because they will say, well, we're loving, and we want to look after people and we care for their well-being, so we're following the guidelines. Well, whose guidelines? The guidelines from the governing body.
I thought the governing body.
Yeah, that's the guidelines they're following. They're not bothered about people's welfare. Ultimately, they will only do, obviously, what the governing body tells them to do, because that's ultimately their authority.
And could it be that the governing body is more concerned about statistics, membership numbers? Maybe they're afraid. Maybe they just don't trust Jehovah to protect Jehovah's people.
Yeah, indeed.
So they actually, you can get witnesses to communicate with you as a former JW. They'll still talk to you.
Yeah, again, I think I've learned as I've gone along. Really, there's times when people won't. I'm in a precarious situation. I found this just recently again, where I responded to a letter that my father-in-law received through his door. And actually, I think he found it when he was walking. I think it was on a bench somewhere, Watchtower Magazine, with a letter inside and an email address. They passed it on to me. I emailed the lady, who was a Hindu convert to the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, my.
And I emailed her, and we got in correspondence, and she said, do you do Zoom? And I said, yeah. She said, well, why don't we meet on Zoom for a chat? So I said, great, let's meet. We met on Zoom 2 weeks ago. And of course, she didn't come by herself. She brought 2 circuit overseers with her.
Whoa, the big guns there, yeah.
The big guns. So they were there. She said, I hope you don't mind. I thought, well, it would have been nice to tell me this beforehand, but okay. And then, you try and figure out, how am I going to play this? Do I play dumb and just ask questions that I know the answers for already, and in order to try and speak to them, or do I be honest and share? In the past, I had some involvement with you. It was a long time ago now. I decided to do the latter, and they seemed okay with that. They said, look, can we meet again next week for a discussion? I said, great. We arranged it. And then, of course, half an hour later, I received a message saying, sorry, we never want to speak to you ever again. So again, you have those people who do that. And then you have other people who say, well, it was a long time ago, and yeah, we'll talk to you. And so I've got a mixture of people, from those who don't seem to know a lot to those who know an awful lot, still wanting to share with me. And I just try and be winsome and open and loving towards them, but have a proper discussion with them.
So Don, I just sent you an image.
I see that, yeah. JW.org. What is
and
that?
the reason I sent it to you is because I have it on my iPad and I have no way that I can think of to get it to my computer quickly. Is there a way you can display that? I saw this on my walk. I take anywhere between a 5 and an 8 mile walk every morning to try to lose weight. And there's this recently built house on a street called Agua Linda near where I live. I didn't realize it was unoccupied until the second or third time I went by it. And on the recently poured cement driveway near the street, someone it's one of these U-shaped, horseshoe-shaped driveways, so you can go in and go out. On both, I didn't realize also that it was on both sides. I would have taken a picture of the other one too. The apron where it meets the apron of the driveway where it meets the road. Someone had, before the cement dried, they had chiseled into the wet cement a square, a box, and inside the box, jw.org.
Oh, wow.
And they did this on both aprons. The second apron, they underneath jw.org, they put 2021. So I realized this has been done in the last few weeks. The house is not occupied. I doubt the owner who buy the house. I don't even know if it's sold yet. They have, spec houses built on speculation that it will sell.
Okay, here you go.
Here we go. This is what it looks like. So apparently they're doing even more than going door to door. They're actually chiseling. Well, I consider this vandalism.
So they're chiseling. They're chiseling now.
Yeah, they're chiseling.
Yeah.
I consider this an act of vandalism. If unless I'm totally wrong and the actual owner put that in, but since it doesn't appear to me that the house has been sold yet, I really strongly doubt that. So sounds like they're getting desperate in terms of making sure they get their hours in. I wonder how many hours that might have taken. Maybe just a few minutes if the cement was wet. I don't want to falsely accuse anybody, but that looks rather suspicious to me.
I do. I love to do that myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don, you can play the bad cop. Don, you play the good cop.
I just couldn't help. I had to take a picture of it after the 20th time I passed it. So so anyways.
But I think that's what they do. I think that's what they're doing, Ron. Not necessarily chiseling jw.org in every driveway, but they're looking to share particularly their website and their literature by any means possible at the moment. So we're finding literature everywhere.
And they're counting that as service time, right?
Yes, definitely.
One of the things that we want to just touch on briefly before we find your story about leaving the Watchtower is there are many who sometimes might have doubts or register their doubts, or the Watchtower might catch them thinking independently.
Oh no, that would be terrible.
Yeah. And the result is they will ask you to leave, not in a nice way, and that can be a lot of work.
And you really want to cut down on that work. So our friends at WorldZen Theology Outlet, your whatever it is, whatever I say about them, one stop resource for half-baked heresies, dubious doctrines, other ideas whose time is gone. As soon as I get the first words out, I know what I'm talking about. They have some questions for us. The first question is, do you struggle to find time to deal with all the evil slaves in your midst? Do you need help in making examples out of those who question Jehovah's organization? Are there more apostates in your kingdom hall than you know what to do with? Well, millions now living will never fly out of your kingdom hall faster than with the left foot of disfellowship. It's patented. I could say that it's patented technology automates the process. You line them up, it kicks them out. The winner of the 2015 Soul of the Organization Award, the left foot of disfellowship, available at WorldZen Theology outlet. So does that just warm the cockles of your heart, Tony, just to see that?
It really, really does. Yeah, it's really professionally done. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it looks like a lot of money's been spent on that advertising.
We pay the big bucks. That's how it comes out. I don't want to. I can't tell you how the sausage is made. All I can do is show.
We just have the best sponsors for sure.
Yeah. For sure.
I was looking for a passage. It's not, and it took me a while to find it. But in the Gospels, we have this interesting thing, or it might even be Acts, where the author says this: "Do not be moving from house to house." So what does that do with going door to door? That sort of flies in the face of Watchtower claims in that area, it seems to me.
I think you're right, Don, but I think what that does is really shows that maybe Jehovah's Witnesses have never seen that verse, because one of the things that I hear often is, I don't know how to speak to the Jehovah's Witnesses. This is usually from Christians.
Yes.
Because they know their stuff so well. But what they know so well is what they've been taught. That's what they know so well. They're like salespeople. They've got a pitch. And
right.
If you feed into what they've been taught, then they're hard work. But there are lots of things in Scripture and questions that they've never been asked. And so I think that's the way to go with them. And so like that, I think they will see the passages that makes it look like you've got to go door to door. You know, in the book of Acts, they were going from village to village and door to door, house to house. But they'll not see that one, or even if they do, they'll just ignore that, because ultimately they're not following what the Bible teaches. They claim they are, but they're actually teaching what the Watchtower teaches. And for someone like me, who was studying the Bible with them, so-called studying the Bible, but actually learning Watchtower theology, I just believe that's what the Bible taught. And I think once you get to that place of believing that the governing body, these guys who head up the organization, are God's only mouthpiece, the faithful and discreet slave, as they call them, then you believe everything. You just follow blindly. And so you will say things like, well, I can leave anytime I want. Or they'll say things like, well, you know, I studied this for myself. You know, I use lots of different Bibles. Like Ron said, you know, they'll quote other Bibles and stuff. But it all feeds into the Watchtower narrative and their theology. And so ultimately, that's what you're believing. But you honestly believe you're a Bible Christian. In fact, the only true Bible Christian.
Now, several years ago, there was a bit of a controversy over a recording that somebody made. They had a Jehovah's Witness in their door, like in the foyer of their house or whatever at the door. And this Christian fellow was kind of peppering him with questions, but he had one main question, and that was, if I were to show you from the Bible that Jehovah's Witnesses doctrine was false, and if you could tell absolutely that I was right, that the Bible contradicts the Watchtower Society, would you leave the Watchtower Society? And the man said no.
Right.
He wouldn't leave it. The reason this was controversial was because apparently the Jehovah's Witnesses didn't know he was being recorded. So it was broadcast, and I thought I downloaded it to, you know, because it was rather telling. But we're talking probably 2 computer crashes ago, so I don't know exactly where it is. You know, I try to keep backups, so hopefully I did, but it'll take a while to find it. Is this an anomaly? Is this something unusual that Jehovah's Witnesses would rather stay with the society than with the Bible?
Oh, of course.
Even though they claim that, wouldn't they say though that the Bible is the ultimate authority, or would they say that?
They would indeed say that, but they believe that only the faithful and discreet slave can understand it.
Interpret it.
So they'll say.
Sorry, go on, Ron.
So they'll say that, okay, it looks to me like they contradict the Bible, but because I'm not the faithful and discreet slave, I can't really know.
You can't. Okay, this is important. By the way, that passage is Luke 10:7.
Yeah.
And it tells you very clearly, do not go from house to house. It's a process. When you start studying with them, and Tony can verify this or say I'm out to lunch, but it's a process that you go, okay, they answered my questions, so they seem to be really people of the book. It sounds like that. And then as time goes on, you are familiarized with the idea that the book is only written to the anointed class. It's not written to everybody.
Yeah.
And so in order to understand what the Bible says, you might misunderstand by reading it on your own. And so to solve that, you only read Watchtower material, who's now told you the truth about it. And then doubting the Watchtower causes you to be annihilated. And so I can't doubt the Watchtower, because to do so, I would be annihilated. Why is that? Well, because salvation is only for the anointed class. They're the only ones who are brothers of Christ. And your salvation is dependent solely, I love that word, solely on how you treat the anointed class. It's not even solely based on faithfully going door to door or believing on the Lord. No, it's how you treat the anointed class is the sole question in whether you will have everlasting life or everlasting cutting off. Is that accurate?
Absolutely accurate. Yeah, I mean, in their own literature, it says that much. They will say, look, because Jehovah and Jesus trust the faithful and discreet slaves, so should you. Stuff like that. So what does that say? That says then that you've got to follow the faithful and discreet slave and put your trust in them, because they link it with Jehovah. And so, to disobey the organization is to disobey Jehovah. To leave the organization is to leave Jehovah. And once the group does that, that's powerful, because ultimately then your salvation is dependent on your obedience to this anointed group of people.
So they take Ron's little line there. Our opinions are not just ours, but should be yours as well.
Yeah.
And add to it, your salvation depends on it.
Right. Well, it sounds like the whatever the organization or the top dogs in the organization, they're really the mediator between God and man. Then.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really, really are. And so how you treat them determines how Jehovah views you. So you can't disagree with them. You can't speak out against them.
So what caused you to consider leaving, and how did you get to ReachOut Trust?
Yeah, well, I mean, I never really considered leaving. I thought I'd found the truth and everything was good for me. But about 3.5 years in, I began a new job. And I heard there was a Christian who worked there. And he was pointed out to me. He used to sit in his office every lunchtime reading a book and eating his lunch. And the moment I heard he was a Christian, I thought, I'm going to go and get him. And I just wanted to go and get him and sort of speak to him about what I believed. And so I remember bursting into his office one day and introduced myself.
Did you literally burst in? Or?
Yeah, I really did. Yeah, kicked down the door like Jehovah's Witnesses do. Kicked down the door, thrust a Watchtower magazine in his hand. No, but I actually asked him the question that I used to ask everybody who said they were a Christian, and that is, can you explain the Trinity to me? That was my big bugbear, and it is for many, many Jehovah's Witnesses. The Trinity is a nonsense. It doesn't make sense. It's not biblical. It comes from Babylon, from paganism, all this stuff. That's what I really, really believed. And of course, bless him, he was just sat there reading his book, and I go bursting in asking this Trinity question. And he stumbled to answer the question. And I was very quick and very arrogant. I said, well, the reason you're struggling to answer my question is because it's not true. And of course, you can't answer it. And I think probably at the time, I threw out some of my proof texts at the time to prove that Jesus couldn't be God. And but David, this guy, was very, very calm with me. In fact, I remember saying to the people at the Kingdom Hall, he was a really, really lovely guy, but he just needed the truth. Because he never used to get flustered with me. I used to get angry with him and flustered with him, but he never used to with me. And I think what David did immediately, what he did do immediately, unbeknown to me, was to get his church to pray for me. And so before I became a Christian, I had a whole church praying for me by name, week in, week out, I believe. And he invited me to his church. Well, I was never going to go to his church as a Jehovah's Witness. Especially since it had a big cross on the outside of it. I didn't want to go anywhere near there. And so I turned that down, and then he changed tack, and he said, "Why don't you come to my house to meet my family? I've told them all about you. You can have a meal with us." And I asked my elders at the Kingdom Hall, "What do you think?" They said, "Yes, go. Take literature with you. Leave it around his house and everything." So I went along and met his wife and his children, and I didn't realize, but he'd invited another couple of Christians along to the meal, which bothered me a little bit at the time, that he didn't tell me there were others going to be there. But afterwards, after the meal, he said, "Oh, we're going to retire into the living room." We went into the living room, and he set me up a little bit, because they said, "All right, let's just pray before we start." And I went, "Pray? What do you mean pray?" And I remember a guy who I'm a good friend of now, but at the time, I thought he was weird. He closed his eyes, he put his hand in the air, and he began to pray. And I was like, "I need to get out of here." And I felt very uncomfortable. They tried to have some discussion afterwards, but I just said to David, "Look, I don't know what you've done here, but I'm not staying." And I didn't drive at the time. I didn't really know how to get home from where I was. But he said, "Look, we'll give you a lift home." And someone else at the group, one of these Christians, actually gave me a lift home, a lady. And all the way home in the car, I was asking her about the Trinity. It was just my big thing all the time. And she struggled to answer as well.
Well, I would have asked you, can you explain how gluons pop in and out of existence in particle physics and quantum theory? I mean, it's a truth that if this wasn't true, our cell phones wouldn't work. And yet, in fact, none of our computers would work. If quantum theory wasn't true, virtually all of our computer science would not work. And yet, even Einstein couldn't explain it. In fact, that was the reason why he said he didn't believe God plays dice with the cosmos. It was in response to quantum theory. He didn't accept quantum theory, and yet we know it's true. It's been proven experimentally time and time again. Just because you can't explain something doesn't mean it's not true. But go ahead.
You're absolutely right, Ron, and thanks for sharing that, because I think that's the point we need to make with the Jehovah's Witnesses. There are a number of things we don't understand. I don't understand how this is working, actually, that I'm speaking to you now. You're in the States, I'm over in the UK, and how it's all work. I don't understand it all, but it's clearly working. And I think you need to make that point with the Jehovah's Witnesses, but in their minds, if something isn't logical, that means it isn't true.
Right.
Because it's got to be logical. God is not the author of confusion. And
but there can be a logic that we just can't see.
Absolutely.
There could be a logic that's beyond our sensory perception, that's beyond our mental capacity.
Yeah.
Just because it's not logical to you doesn't mean it's not logical.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And I think that's what we need to challenge the JWs with. But I think what it also shows with these two lovely Christians who helped me come out of the JWs, actually, is that they just couldn't defend the Trinity either. And we know it's difficult to understand the Trinity, and it's not logical, and it can fry our brain a little bit, but we need to have a response to why do you believe the Trinity is true?
I would just back up and say it actually is logical, but it is a little beyond our grasp. It doesn't mean not logical. There's a difference between that.
Somewhere in my garage, I think I have a Watchtower Magazine. And in this Watchtower Magazine, there is a man who is giving his testimony as a Jehovah's Witness in his life, as all the years of field service he did. And in one of his encounters, somebody demanded him to explain, when did God begin, and how who created God, when was he born, whatever. And much to his credit, the Jehovah's Witness said, well, he never began. He's eternal. He has no beginning. The man said, well, that's not logical. Everything has a beginning. And the Jehovah's Witnesses quoted Psalm 90, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. So he said, you might not be able to understand it, but the Bible teaches it.
Right.
Okay, so admittedly, an eternal being with no beginning is beyond our anything we can relate
ability to grasp.
We
Right.
cannot
Yes.
grasp it. It makes no. It is not logical from the sense that we have no reference point for it other than revelation, other than the Bible teaches it. So why the fact that they cannot, that they can use this logic when it comes to God's eternal nature, but refuse to use it, and that's what I think is going on here. It's a refusal. It's not an inability. It's an unwillingness. That's my opinion. But
okay,
yeah, I think you're right, Ron. And
you're talking to this lady in the car, and what happens next?
Yeah, so she dropped me off home. I was a little bit annoyed with David, this guy I worked with, because of what he'd done, but we worked closely together. And I wish I could remember what it was that opened me up a little bit. But I remember something at the Kingdom Hall one Sunday morning, went to work on the Monday morning, asked David a question about it. I can't remember exactly what it was now. And he gave me an answer. And it was the first time he'd said anything that made sense to me. More sense than what I'd heard at the Kingdom Hall. And it was that first little chink of light that appeared. And I think from there, other little chinks of light began to appear. I began to listen to him.
What did he say? What did he say?
Well, I can't remember exactly what it was that we'd been learning at the Kingdom Hall, but I remember asking him about it, which I used to do often. I used to we'd share what we were learning, and he said something to me, and I wish I could remember. I wish I'd recorded it, but there was just something, and I thought, that sort of makes sense. And it was that little chink of light.
Was the thing that annoyed you the fact that he prayed with the extended hand, or what was it that annoyed you?
I think just the fact that he'd invited other Christians along, and there seemed to be a bit of a setup. And it seemed that we were going to go into some kind of discussion. Now, normally I'd have been quite up for that, really, the way I was.
Never would do anything like that.
No, of course not. No, they'd never invite along circuit overseers
that would never
to a Zoom meeting without you knowing.
I can see why you were annoyed now.
Yeah. But anyway, this little chink of light appeared. And then I think that was the Holy Spirit working. I wouldn't have described it as such at the time. But it began to mean then, I think, the more and more we discussed, the more I began to listen to what he was saying. And a few of the little chinks of light appeared, and I began to sort of ask questions more. And you always go back to the Kingdom Hall and ask the questions to the elders, and you're always fobbed off, really. You're always thrown back to the latest Watchtower Magazine or the latest book or whatever it might be. But I began to listen to him a little bit more. And it all culminated for me, really, in him inviting me to a meeting, but it was happening in the local university, not in the church. And everything within me wanted to go along. And I wasn't sure whether I could or I should, but I decided to say yes, in fear and trepidation. And I went along to a meeting, and first time I'd been to a proper Christian meeting. And again, I can't remember everything that happened there. I remember being moved by what I was hearing, moved by what was being sung, because the songs we were singing at the Kingdom Hall are dire compared to what I was hearing here.
I can testify.
And singing about Jesus and everything. And I was just very confused at the end of it. And I spoke to a couple of people there, told them my dilemma. And they said, well, can we pray with you? And I said, no, I'd rather you don't pray for me. But if you want to pray for me, I can't do anything. Well, don't you pray with me? And I came away very confused. But I got David to drop me off near my home. It was a lovely evening. It was around this time of year. It was in July. And I remember looking up at the sky and saying, Jehovah, please show me what's true. And I couldn't sleep much that night. But when I woke up the next morning, I just felt an unbelievable peace that I'd never experienced before. Like something had happened, like a weight had been lifted from me. And I said to David, I called him up and said, David, I don't know what's happened, but I couldn't sleep. I was praying to God to show me. He described it as me being born again, told me to read John 3:3. I previously understood that as for a different group of people, not for your average Jehovah's Witness, of course. And but something had clearly happened. And he said, why don't you come to church? And I said, I don't know if I can. And he said, look, we'll look after you. I've been telling people about you. And again, I went along really, really anxious. But I walked through the door, and it was like I was coming home. There were people there that knew my name. I didn't know their name. It's like they'd just been waiting for me to walk through those doors.
It's a setup.
Yeah, it was a setup, clearly a setup. But what was really nice, Ron, was that these people were very loving, very understanding, and gave me time, because it took a little bit of time for me to unravel all that I'd learned, and they allowed that to happen.
Yeah, you needed
so
it. I bet.
Yeah, I needed that, and not as much as some people. I was only in there 4 years, which is long enough to get sucked into it all.
Right.
But I know I'm dealing with people at the moment who have recently come out, and others who are still struggling with some of the things they were in, for many, 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 many years. But for me, it was almost like, I just woke up, the dungeon flamed with light. We sung the song "And Can It Be," and I felt that was written about me.
Wow.
That my heart was free. I rose, went forth, and followed thee, and so that was my way out. I sort of kept away from the JWs a little bit. Sent my dad to the door, bless him, when they came to the house to see where I was. And it was a week or two after that I bumped into a group of them that I knew, and I was just strong enough to say, "Well, I go to church," and they said, "Well, we don't want anything to do with you anymore." And
wow,
that's how it played out.
When you were going to your elders and asking, passing on questions, that this fellow at work was, or you were dealing with questions about what he said. Did they try to kind of tell you to stay away from him at any point? Did they warn you away from him?
Yeah, I believe they did, but I worked at close quarters with him every day, and I think that's another problem that the JWs have. It's not like this lady I've just told you about, who I met on Zoom, who now won't meet with me again, and I don't know where she lives. She doesn't know where I live. I had to work with the guy, and I was beginning to be interested in some of the things he was saying, and so I think the work of the Holy Spirit and working with him meant that I couldn't stay away from him completely, like they maybe were wanting me to. But they often didn't answer the questions I had either that he brought forward. Again, I was always just pushed to literature. You need to stop doubting. You need to believe. You have the truth now. Things are not really answered.
Right. So now you're a believer. You're involved with the church. How did you go from there to being involved with ReachOut Trust? I mean, you do a lot with them, right?
Yeah, well, ReachOut Trust, I've known ReachOut Trust a number of years as well. I think when I came out of the JWs, my first thought was, I don't want anything to do with these guys ever again. But God quickly made it that I had a heart for them, and I've always had a heart for them because I've been amongst them, and I think they're really sincere people, sincerely wrong and misled, but sincere. And so I've always sort of like talked a little bit about the group, or had an interest in other groups, false groups. And so I was doing some of that by myself, but I was aware of Doug Harris as well. I met Doug a couple of times and went to one or two of his training things that he did. He was down in London. I'm up here in sort of Yorkshire, which is 200 miles away, which is nothing to you Americans, I know. But
that's where they have that's where they have all the terriers, right?
Yeah, that's right, the Yorkshire Terrier. Yeah. And not the people, just the dogs.
Just
the
terriers.
And so we corresponded a few times and everything, and but I never really worked closely with him. I was interviewed by him on his TV show when he had the TV show as well on Revelation TV. So we were in communication with each other, and then I just felt a pull of the Lord to just do more and more of this stuff. And I had a couple of other guys who were interested in this stuff, and we were trying to do stuff. But I was in communication a little bit with Michael Thomas, who took over at ReachOut Trust when Doug passed away. And I began to think to myself, again, God sort of spurred me on and said, well, look, I'm trying to do all this stuff here, and Michael's down there in Wales trying to do his stuff with the London office. Why don't we work together? So I got in touch with Michael, and then for the last few years, we've been working a lot more closely together on the blog posts, on the website, and looking at how we can move the ministry forward, because I think he lost a little bit of momentum after Doug passed away. He was ReachOut Trust,
right?
And we're now looking at how do we move this forward and do various things together.
Right.
Yeah. So
Well, it's a good organization. So I know
Mm.
Bob Gray was talking about maybe doing a Witness Now for Jesus convention in the UK at some point.
Absolutely. I spoke to Bob a little while ago about this. Yeah, maybe need to sort of pick that back up again. Yeah, before
Yeah.
COVID hit.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Right.
we would love to do something like that.
Yeah, it could be
Well-
fun. Yeah, we have 4 of them going on here in the States now. We've got the East Coast. In fact, that's coming up at the end of September. West Coast in California, mid states in Missouri, and they just started one. Actually, 5. Just started one in Texas now, and one in Florida.
That's amazing.
Where in Florida, Don?
It's north of you. I'd have to look it up again. Kevin
Okay.
Luna is doing that one. So
Oh, Tampa.
yeah, Tampa.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Well, I think it makes sense for me and Michael to pay a visit to all of those, with an idea of thinking about doing it in the UK. I think so.
Well, and if you do Florida in the winter, that's just.
Well, you're talking about 200 miles in the U.S. Right? Because Joy and I were long haul truckers for a long time, and for in the U.S. in the States, that is not like Australia, which really is long haul trucking. But when I speak at a conference, I had a friend in Denver. I was going to speak there, and he said, when does your flight get in? When am I going to pick you up? I said, flight? I'm going to drive. He goes, drive? I go, yeah, it's only 17 hours. He goes, only a trucker could say it's only 17 hours.
Yeah, indeed.
I think you need to rebrand, over there. You should call York Old York, and in exchange, we'll call New York State New Yorkshire. Will that work?
Well, I think there's some mileage in that. I think I would go for that. Yeah, I mean, we're always talking about Yorkshire.
Yeah.
I mean, Yorkshire is where God resides, of course. So we're happy to. If you want to rebrand it to New Yorkshire.
Yeah.
So we have ReachOut Trust information in the description panel. Where's my hand? At the bottom there, so they can get that. But if they want to contact you, do they contact you through that, or do you have another way that you want them to reach you?
You can definitely get me through ReachOut Trust. I'm happy to share my email address if that's helpful to you. Or
completely up to you.
Yeah, I mean, do I just tell you what it is? And
yeah, probably.
I can. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's the one that you emailed me on today. So it's Tony.Brown at A of E. So letter A of E, which stands for Association of Evangelists. That's something else I'm involved in. aofe.org.uk.
Excellent.
All right, and I will go back and put that in the description so people can contact you there. Now, you haven't written any books or anything yet, right?
I've got one very small book that I've done, and I've got one on the way. I just happen to have it here. I don't know why.
You don't know why?
Yeah, it's only very small. Sharing the gospel with Jehovah's Witnesses.
All right.
So I'm currently doing one, same format. It's very small, not very in depth, very much for the layperson. I'm doing the same one on sharing the gospel with Jehovah's Witnesses. Interestingly, the Mormons.
Okay.
So it's interesting. Mike is a former Mormon, but he's tending to write a lot of articles about Jehovah's Witnesses. And I'm the former Jehovah's Witness writing a lot of articles about Mormons, and it's helping us both understand both groups. So yeah, we've got these available through ReachOut Trust, and in America now through 10ofthose.com. It's 10 of those has come to America, I believe. So
okay, good. Well, if you have a link on that, send it to me for in the US.
I will.
We can let people know about that because I do want them to know. Really love working with you guys. It's been encouraging to see things going on over there. Maybe we're discouraging to you because we do make fun of a lot of stuff, but we think some important issues still need to be made fun of because it's a good way of making a point. And the left foot of this fellowship makes a point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
I think there's a lot of mileage in that. I remember once sharing my testimony and then just a little bit about reaching Jehovah's Witnesses in a church here in the UK. And a lady came up to me afterwards and she was really unhappy that we'd been laughing. She said, laughing at the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I think a little bit like you guys, you make the distinction between, laughing at them or not laughing at them. I love them. That's why I'm sharing with you.
Right.
But actually, some things are funny. They're just genuinely funny. And yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So, well, the Witness Now for Jesus, they record those, and for years, Joy was kind of. We used to have a Folgers commercial here, or one of the coffee companies anyway, and the lady was kind of the neighborhood coffee pusher.
Oh yeah, Mrs. Olson, wasn't it?
Mrs. Olson, yeah, the neighborhood coffee pusher.
Mountain
Joy was like that
Grove.
with audio tapes. She would get a Jehovah's Witness willing to take them, and she would send truckloads all at once. Initially, they would say, the laughing is a little hard for me to take. But then after they became believers, they said, it totally makes sense. I laugh at that stuff now that I realize it. So, and with
absolutely.
that, I know we're running a little over time here for Ron. So, Ron, would you care to
Yes.
help
you find the door. Is that what we're saying?
Okay. Door, right.
All right. Let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon archives manager is Polygamous. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur, special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys. Oh, dehumanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Joleg Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey Cheatham Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami, director of privacy assurance, wiretapping, and original idea sourcing comes from Drew LeBlanc. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happened.
Not even it never has so far. And I think, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So,
and Ron, I really do like that theme music. That is really good fun.
You're very welcome. It was hard to get it into the production.
All right. If you guys will hold on a second, you can all wave goodbye.
Adios.